How we're going to run this is that we're going to give each candidate an opportunity to introduce themselves, and then we have some questions that we'd like to ask them, and then we'd like questions from all of you. And rather than do a show of hands and run around with the microphone, on your table is a small index card. If you could write your question on the index card and then make the chamber staff aware that you have a question that will be collected. We'll do our best to answer as many of the questions as we can. My goal is to have you all out and on your way by 9:30. I know the agenda says 9, but there's no way we can respectfully give these folks that little amount of time to be able to let us know a little bit more about them. So with that, in Placer County this year, 2 supervisorial districts are up for election. Supervisorial District 1, Bonnie Gore, from the city of Roseville, does not have a challenger. But Bonnie's here today. We appreciate Bonnie, and so she's here probably out of some bit of relief and watching what she could have been doing for the next few months. In District 2, with redistricting, District 2 used to include primarily Lincoln, portions of Rockland, and the unincorporated area of Placer County, essentially west of Roseville, south of Lincoln. But with the redistricting changes, District 2 now includes the area of Roseville west of Fittimet Road. So most of all the new growth is happening in the West Roseville Plan, Creekview, and Sierra Vista is now a part of District 2. It's an opportunity where Roseville will have 3 representatives on the Placer County Board of Supervisors. We thought it was important for our chamber members to learn a little bit about these candidates and the important decisions that the voters in District 2 will make by having them come today and share a little bit about their vision and their reasons for wanting to be on the Board of Supervisors. So in alphabetical order, I will introduce the candidates and we'll give them an opportunity to say a few words. You'll have 2 minutes to give us who I am that I haven't covered here, and then we'll get into the questions. So first, Scott Alvord is a current Roseville City Council member. He and his family are proud residents of West Roseville and western Placer County. He's a proven, experienced leader, a local business owner, and a devoted civil servant for the region. Paul Joiner is a small business owner, longtime resident of Placer County, and a member of the Lincoln City Council, where he served as a council member now and has previously served as mayor of the city of Lincoln. He is known as a strong fiscal conservative who protects taxpayers. Shanti Landon serves as District 2 Director to the Placer County Board of Supervisors for Supervisor Robert Wygant, and she served in that role since 2017. As a Rotarian and active community member, she is passionate about serving our community and giving back. So with that, I'm going to hand the mic to Scott, and we'll go alphabetically down the road here. In the back of the room, you will see a note when you have 30 seconds left and 10 seconds left, and I'm going to do what I can to keep you all on task. Good luck. Scott?
Good morning. We thank you for coming here and caring enough about this position to learn about your candidates. So I first came to Roseville back in the 80s, and my wife and I have raised our family here. We've started businesses here, and we plan to retire here. I do live on the western edge of Roseville. There's county development all on 3 edges of where I live, and I've been learning a lot about the aspects. I'm really interested in this position because I have a business background, and I really think we need that at the county level. There's so many issues that come up that are economic drivers, and the county has such an impact on our cities that I think having a business perspective is going to be very valuable. I care about what's happening in my city. I care about what's happening in our county, and I also care about representing people. I feel like I've done a good job of being involved in the community, being very responsive to the community, and I believe I have a servant's heart, and that's one of the reasons I chose to do this. So again, thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Scott. Good morning, everybody. My name is Paul Joiner, and as John pointed out, I'm a homegrown boy. I have lived pretty much my entire life in about a 10-mile radius of where we are right now. I've got very, very deep roots in this community. What I want to say is that I believe that this is an incredibly important election for Placer County. The current District 2 supervisor is retiring after holding the seat for 26 years. His predecessor held the seat for 24 years. In that 26 years, in the 26 years that Robert has been supervisor of District 2, the city of Lincoln has grown from a population of about 8,400 to over 50,000 people today. Roseville's grown from roughly 70,000 people to over 150,000 people today. So why is that important? Through the years, what I've observed and experienced as a council member of the city of Lincoln is that county supervisors tend to govern as though they represent the unincorporated county alone. And they don't. They represent the entire district and the entire county. We have many of the same constituents, and I think it's time that we have a supervisor who knows and who governs with that in mind. A supervisor who builds partnerships within our cities, and within our communities. The county of Placer has been seeing similar growth to our cities over that past 26 years. Lincoln and Roseville, and the county's population is currently around 400,000 people. It's projected to grow by 30% over the next decade. That's 120,000 new residents of Placer County over the next 10 years. Most of that growth is going to happen right here, right over there in District 2. So, with that, as a supervisor, my challenge will be to preserve Placer County's quality of life and to protect our values in the face of that growth. Placer County is one of the safest counties in California, and our cities are among the safest as well. So we need to continue our long history of supporting our law enforcement communities, and I think that's going to be key to preserving that quality of life. Housing, both affordable and otherwise, incredibly important moving forward. Transportation, roads, economic competitiveness, jobs, homelessness is going to be a huge issue for us to address. It's doubling every 7 years in the state of California. All these issues will need to be dealt with thoughtfully and deliberately and addressed as we keep moving forward as Placer County, trying to keep it that very special place that we all know and love. That's going to take knowledge, experience, and a steady hand moving forward, and that's why I'm running for Placer County Supervisor.
5 years ago, after a series of events and conversations with my husband, I decided to run for Placer County Supervisor. So knowing that I had very little experience, I reached out to the sitting supervisor, Robert Weigan, asked if he would let me shadow him. I told him I was willing to work for him for free, full-time. I just wanted to learn the job. And when he told me that I would have limited access as a volunteer, I asked if he would hire me as his district director. Thankfully, he said yes, and now it's been 5 years, and it has been an incredible learning experience. I have had the pleasure and the privilege of essentially mirroring what a supervisor does for the past 5 years, and it's been incredible training. Looking forward, there are a few things I'm focused on. First and foremost is fiscal sustainability in the long term for our county. We've had generations of incredible leadership, and I just want to build upon that and keep that going. Secondly is our public safety. I am absolutely committed to making sure that we are well funded as we grow, which we're going to do, and to make sure that our law enforcement and firefighters are well compensated above market rates so that we can recruit and retain quality candidates. And thirdly, economic development and small business. Small businesses comprise 91% of Placer County's business, so that just goes to show that they are the backbone of our economy, and doing whatever we can to support them so that they can thrive is super important. And lastly, I just kind of wanted to mention a couple things that I just think distinguish myself from other candidates in the race. I am the only person in this race, and would be the only person on the Board of Supervisors to have children at home. And although that's not the demographic for everyone, it's a big chunk of Placer County, and I believe it would do them well to have a representative who is walking in the trenches, because raising kids in this world it's crazy. It's like the Twilight Zone. And secondly, my job as district director, I believe has set me up for the perfect opportunity to have a seamless transition into this role. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the questions.
Thank you, Shanti. Does this one play real? Thank you, Shanti. So now we're going to get into our some of our questions. in order to try to have a bit of fairness, we randomly drew names for the order, and we will rotate that as we go through the questions. So that resulted in Scott will go first, Shanti, and then Paul, and then as I said, we'll rotate through those. So first question we'd like to ask, well, we're going to ask you about why you wanted to be a supervisor. I think all of you covered that in your opening. If any of you wanted to add something more, happy to give you that opportunity. Otherwise, we'll just get into the questions. Okay, so the first question is, homelessness is becoming a community-wide issue and affects residents and businesses alike. Do you favor a comprehensive county-wide approach, or do you prefer to allow each city and the county to manage its homeless population? What would you do differently to address homelessness? Scott, that's to you.
Back when I ran my restaurant, I got very interested in homeless issues because I lost a $700 bridal shower because of a fight in the back parking lot. And I got very concerned, started asking questions, and I got appointed to the Placer County Homeless Advisory Committee back then. They brought in Dr. Marbett from Texas, did an analysis of our county, and it was a very eye-opening process to go through. I started organizing with other volunteers. We were all volunteers. We had attorneys and land developers and just community-interested people. We formed an organization that went out and studied solutions to try to actually figure out how we could solve the problem. And not just get rid of them, but actually restore them and try to heal them as part of the process. What we learned during that time is one of the best models nationwide is actually a campus-type model with wraparound programming. So you're not just putting people in a shelter, you're actually putting them in permanent housing, emergency housing, and then you have to have a small shelter element in order to meet the regulation to enforce your no camping. And over a long process, the plan got moved to the Gathering Inn, who's taken it and even approved the idea. I know the proposal hasn't come forward, we haven't seen all the details yet. But that kind of an idea actually solves the problem. Each homeless person costs the county about $45,000 a person per year. And if you get them into this kind of a model, it brings it down to $12,000 a year. It saves millions of dollars a year. It's actually an economic good thing. About 85% of your residents historically have been restored, which is a fantastic, and we're actually fixing the problem. So for me, I'm very much supportive of a concept of bringing them together into one area with a wraparound program to heal people, and it gets them out of our neighborhoods, gets them out of our cities where it's bothering our residents. And it also gives us, and with a one-year residency requirement, it keeps it from being a magnet, drawing other people from out of our county. We only take care of our own who have lived here for a while. So that's kind of my background on it, and I want to fix the problem. We're up to about 800 people now. It keeps growing, and if it keeps getting bigger, at some point it's not going to be fixable. We're going to be like some of the bigger cities where there's just too many people, and all you can do is build tent cities. It just becomes too expensive. So I'd like to see us tackle it while it's so small.
Thank you, Scott. To Shanti, would you like to repeat the question?
No.
Okay, thanks.
So I think first and foremost, whatever we decide to do with homelessness in Placer County is going to require a collaboration. We are all affected and impacted by homelessness, whether it's on a personal level or whether it's just by walking down the street. So first and foremost, it needs to be a relationship between all of the cities in the county. Secondly, my own father was schizophrenic and died homeless, and so I have a special soft spot in my heart for this topic. I think Reagan was an incredible president, and he's one of my favorite presidents, but to me, one of the biggest tragedies that happened on his watch was the closing of the mental institutions, and I think reforms needed to happen for sure, but getting rid of those made it so that someone like my dad, who had plenty of resources and programs available to him, had family that was willing to take him in, but because of his mental illness, chose to live homeless and die on the streets because he was not capable of taking care of himself. And so having that taken away was a big tragedy in my mind. Thirdly, right now the county requirement to get services for homelessness is 15 days. So if you're up at the DeWitt Center in Alvord and you see the 100+ people who are living there, half of those people are now not from Placer County. I would want to make sure that we increase that. I would love to see a year because I think it's important that we be servicing our own residents first and foremost and using our tax dollars to take care of our people, and hopefully other jurisdictions will step up and take care of their own people as well. So lastly, I just want to say, and I think we may all agree on this, that treating homelessness is not just about housing people. It really is about getting down to the core issues of why are people living on the street. And it almost always boils down to drug addiction and or mental illness. And oftentimes those go hand in hand. And so whatever we decide to do, it's got to be treating the actual illness as opposed to just putting a bandage on the symptom.
Thank you, Shanti.
This is a huge question that's facing all of us. There's no question that we need to work together on this. The county, the cities, all of us together. We're doing that right now. I'm on the homeless ad hoc committee that has been looking at potential solutions at every step of the way. We haven't settled on any singular solutions yet. There are a great many, and I think that's a huge conversation for all of our communities to have, not just our elected officials. I think that's important that we, in the city of Lincoln, we're going to be holding some town hall meetings. We're going to talk about it as a community. We have a very small homeless population. Our recent point in time count was only 47. That's actually down by about 20% from the last one. I think we're doing really well. Most of those folks are homegrown. We know them. There are two populations, I believe, of homeless, if you want to put them in big chunks. Those who want help and those who don't. For those who want help, we absolutely have the programs and the solutions to get them back on their feet, to get them housed, to get them treated for any issues they're facing. Shanti is correct. Addiction and mental health issues are huge driving factors in this. I think virtually everyone in this room has probably got somebody in their life who has faced these types of challenges. I personally do as well. So with respect to what the solutions are, what we do differently, I'm just looking at this broadly right now. I think there needs to be a centralized campus, very probably up at the Wood Center, that has all those wraparound services right there on campus. I will tell you that the individual that I'm thinking of that is in my family that has challenges, any potential point of failure can cause a rapid downward spiral for that individual. This is going to sound silly, but having to get up in the morning at a certain time, get showered, get dressed, get on a bus, get to an appointment, each and every one of those steps is a potential point of failure. And that day will go very, very badly if any of that goes wrong. So the ability for someone who desperately needs programs and solutions to be able to walk across a campus to those appointments, I think is really important. Down here around Roseville and South Placer, Lincoln, that entire area, I think potentially the solution is more of a diffuse solution, a disbursement of services. I don't know yet, because that again creates the potential for failure if they need to seek transportation. So I think we've got to have that conversation. How do we treat and serve those individuals in our communities without heavily impacting our businesses and our communities? How do we do that? And I'm not sure what that solution is down here. I don't think it's forgive me, Keith, I don't think it's a 600-bed mega campus in South Placer. I think we can do something smaller and more diffused that might address that better. But I think that's a conversation for us all to have moving forward.
Thank you, Paul. All right, our next question, we're going to start with Shanti. Transportation on our federal and state local roadway networks are reaching their design capacity. PCTPA has done a commendable job of cobbling together funding to make some slight improvements, but the comprehensive solution to our traffic issues greatly exceeds our ability to fund this locally or alone. And to access state and federal money, we often need a local match for funding. This means a sales tax or other broad-based funding source. Did you support Measure M, the sales tax measure, in 2016? Would you support a similar measure for the southeastern portion of the county with similar projects listed maybe on the ballot in 2024?
The answer is yes. I supported Measure M, and I still do. I think it may have been the first and only tax increase I've ever supported, and that is in large part due to a number of things. First, I learned of the funding structure change when it comes to the partnership between us and the state and feds. and how it used to be a 90-10 split and now it's a 50-50 split and we have to come up with that 50%. I realized we were in a different predicament. And secondly, when I found out that the transportation measure is handled here locally as opposed to all of the money being handled at the state first and then being doled out, that was really what pushed me over the edge, because as we've all seen with the gas tax, things aren't always what we think they are when we vote for them on a ballot. And so I didn't want to get burned again. And so I support Measure M for that reason, but also because if Measure M does not pass, there really is no other viable good option for us when it comes to doing anything on 65. 25% of the traffic that comes through Placer County is not Placer County residents, are not Placer County residents. And so those people should be helping to fund the improvements we need on Highway 65. The only other option is to do a parcel tax, and I think we all know that a parcel tax is not going to pass in a place like Placer County, and I would rather share the burden with the people who are driving through than fund all of that ourselves.
Thank you, Shanti. Paul, I know there was a question in my long, lengthy lead-in.
I think I saw that one there somewhere. I did support Measure M. I, in fact, was on the steering committee that put together Measure M and advanced that forward. I'm the immediate past chair of PCTPA. And again, I'm on a steering committee there that is exploring putting a ballot measure forward. At this point, the polling doesn't look as though that's going to be a viable thing until at least 24. But if the polling says that it needs to reach a 2/3 majority, by the way, which is a very, very high bar to reach. The polling right now is about 64% in favor, which is within the margin of error, but probably unrealistic given what's going on in the world today, inflation, the threat of global conflict, all the rest. So it's very likely that that will not be on the ballot this time out. If the polling says that this is something that the voters want and will approve, I'm absolutely in favor of putting that on the ballot. I think that is probably our only solution moving forward. I agree with Shanti, the parcel tax just is not something that would pass in Placer County, but I think it's essential that we become a self-help county to be able to pull down those massive infrastructure dollars that have been approved on the federal level and coming down through the state.
Thank you, Paul. Scott?
This is really important for quality of life, especially for people that live in Lincoln and anywhere near 65, because it definitely is a parking lot at times. I was a supporter of Measure M, and when it went to vote, the community that I lived in was one of the highest pro votes for it. We went through the Measure B for Roseville, half-cent sales tax, and that kind of saved our city. And my philosophy is, none of us like taxes, but when we have a really good reason for it and we can't get funding any other way, when we bring it home and we own it ourselves and we put an oversight committee on it to make sure the dollars are going where we want them to go, it works really well. It's us solving our own problem. And when Measure B passed in the city of Roseville, again, it's the leaders that are getting out, talking to the community, answering the questions, trying to explain why that actually could be beneficial for us. And I know Western Roseville was one of the highest votes for Measure B, for example. Yes, on this transportation tax, this is critical. We have got to, there's so much development that's coming, and it's just going to absolutely hamper our communities if we don't widen 65. And there's other things that need, besides just 65. I mean, Baseline Road, I had 2 neighbors die in the same day, 2 different accidents. We've got a lot of big issues. Placer Parkway is going to be a fantastic way to move traffic through our communities without being on our roads. So yes, I'm a supporter of Measure B. And when it comes up again, I want to make sure we're doing an analysis to be sure that there's no infrastructure dollars that are available. Because obviously a tax is not your first answer. We want to see if there's any other solution first. But if it's going to be like it has been, yeah, I'd be supportive.
All right, thank you all. I have one more prepared question. We'll start with Paul this time. But I wanted to remind you, if you have questions for the candidates, we'd like questions that each candidate can answer. Please, there's a note card on your table. Fill it out, raise your hand, and a chamber staff member will come by and get it. And we'll try to get to it before the end of our discussion this morning. So the last prepared question we have What are your thoughts on how the county can support the business community in its economic recovery from COVID-19? Where would you prioritize the American Recovery Plan funds best to serve Placer County residents?
To best serve Placer County residents, I'm going to spread that out a little bit. This is the Chamber of Commerce, so I'm going to spread it out to Placer County residents and businesses. I think we're already doing that. I think all of us in our communities, individual communities, have taken our ARPA dollars and put together grant programs for businesses, for not-for-profits, to be able to reach out, to have hopefully significant impacts within our communities and compensate for some of the damage that was done by COVID. I think that in the city of Lincoln, what we're talking about doing is using some of our ARPA dollars to bolster our incredibly understaffed fire department. So we'll be very likely approving the hiring of 9 additional firefighters. That's affecting the quality of life of everyone in the city of Lincoln. And so there are many different ways. I know the county is planning on using some of their dollars to put in infrastructure, crossing Highway 65 and supporting new development in Placer Ranch and areas west of Highway 65. But I think most importantly, what we really need to do is, again, reach out to our communities, have the conversation. What are the needs? We've done that with our business community. We're starting to do that with our not-for-profits. Our plan is to use our not-for-profits as that outreach to the individuals that may need services that the city doesn't otherwise provide. And so we're working very hand in glove with both our not-for-profits and with all of our government agencies. So.
Thank you, Paul. Scott next.
Yeah, I would agree that we've already kind of moved forward. I know our council's already prioritized where we want the funds to go. So, but I'll back up and I'll talk a little bit about economic development in general, because the county has a very big budget. And my belief as a city person is that the county's job, one of their jobs, is to support the cities. They impact our cities, and when the county is actually doing its own development instead of annexing it into the city or doing a tax share in the city, they're hurting our city. So when you put a retail center on the border of Roseville or Lincoln and you don't do a tax share with that city, those residents are going to cross over the border, give their dollars to the county. It stays in the county. None of it comes back to the city. You're actually hurting your city. You're decimating your cities, because you're not thinking about how to take care of them from a business perspective. The businesses are the backbone of our economy. We have property tax dollars, but we also have those sales tax dollars, which are very critical in how our cities operate. And the county has to be working to support our businesses. They have got to be doing tax share agreements that are, and impact fees that help our cities, not hurt our cities. We need to be synergistic. We need to be very transparent about the dollars that the county has in their budget. So when we're doing a tax share agreement, the city feels like we're in a synergistic relationship, not an antagonistic relationship. And I'm from the city, and I'm telling you, it's not a synergistic relationship all the time. And so that's probably the biggest thing there, is that the county needs to just think about what they're doing, because they serve our cities, and they're not as good at developers as our cities are. And when they do the development, they've got to help our cities in the process.
Thank you, Scott. Shanti?
I don't disagree. I think actually urban development should be centered in the cities, and I also don't support putting retail right on the border of cities. Unless there is some type of agreement in place where we can share some of those tax dollars, I think that's the ideal. When it comes to ARPA funding, the county board of supervisors made a decision to take a big chunk of their dollars, as I think both of them mentioned, and put that into the sunset area. I think, and there were a lot of people that pushed back on that and said that money should be going directly into the cities, and I understand that viewpoint. But to me, this is looking 50 years down the road. So investing those dollars into infrastructure in the sunset area, which has been an open space for the last forever, and has been sitting there set aside for 30 plus years, The reason it's been set aside and nothing has happened is because there is no infrastructure out there. So investing millions of dollars of infrastructure to get things going out there is going to change things for the better. So a couple examples. Carvana recently broke ground. They decided to come to Placer County. They chose Placer County because it truly is a business oasis here in California. They had decided they weren't even going to come to California until they found out about Placer County. And they chose our county because we're business friendly. And they're going to be providing 800 plus jobs for our people. Secondly, the Placer Commerce Center is a brand new $1 billion plus project that just submitted their application by Buzz that will be out in the Sunset area and is going in because infrastructure will be out there. That project will be like the next McClellan Business Park, and it will provide 3,000 to 5,000 primary wage earner jobs for the people here in Placer County. So I don't disagree. I think having relationships with our city partners is incredibly important. And if we want to get anything done, we have to be able to sit down at the table and have real, honest, productive conversations. And hopefully the people who know me know that I'm all about relationship. And so, the past is the past to me. If I become supervisor, it's about moving forward in a positive way. And I really hope to do that.
Thank you, Shanti. Okay, we're going to move now into questions that you all have provided to us. But before I do that, I was remiss in not starting this meeting by thanking Randy and Lisa Peters for making this incredible venue available to us. And of course, they're great staff. All right. Try to remember next time, so I apologize, I always miss that. Okay, the first question we have, people long for strong leadership. There are times where a leader needs to take a stand on a difficult issue that is unpopular. Tell us a time as a leader, either politically or professionally, where you took a stand on a difficult issue. And I believe we're starting with Scott.
That's a good question. That's a really good question. As a representative, you often vote for things that you don't totally agree with personally just because you should be representing people. And your own personal beliefs aren't at the top of the priority list. You have to vote the best for your constituents. I think probably the time I showed the strongest leadership is when the pandemic started. It was a very scary moment. We've all had, many of us had the opportunity to run out of toilet paper. That's a very scary moment. And my wife and I had bought a big Costco thing, and we were giving out some toilet paper to neighbors and friends, and there was kind of some discussion going online. I ended up getting tagged a lot on social media. And Ash from Garden of Eden brought over two cases of toilet paper actually. And so I started posting, hey, I got toilet paper. And then it just kind of grew in about a week. And we started an online group, our community volunteer force, and it grew up to 2,000 people, but we had so many people in the community just offering to serve each other. Volunteers that were donating things. My office got full of cleaning supplies and diapers and distilled water for CPAP machines, and I think just the idea of everybody else just kind of went quiet. And so it was a neat opportunity to just help lead the community to do something about it. And we had volunteers picking up deliveries, taking things, selling masks, and this was back when you couldn't buy a mask in the store. Again, everybody's really nervous. Nobody's really totally sure how this thing was getting transmitted. There were no vaccines during that time. And I think that was a big stand. Lots of, the politics started building up with it. Anyway, I think that's where leaders, you step forward and you just serve your community.
So April 10th, 2020, our former health officer made an announcement that she was going to shut down golf courses and landscapers. And we still didn't know a ton about COVID, but I think most of the research was showing that there was no danger for a landscaper working outside by themselves, or for a couple people golfing together or riding around on a golf course outside. And so as soon as I got word that this was happening, I reached out to the executive director at Sun City Lincoln Hills and said, hey, I think this is coming down the pike, and this is a moment where all of your people can shine. They need to write in to our health officer, they need to write into the board of supervisors, and they need to explain why this would be a tragedy for their community. The stories that were coming in from seniors, especially during this time, were heartbreaking. And the mental health of people was suffering in an incredible way. And to tell them that they could not go out on the golf course because they were in danger was a huge mistake, in my opinion. So I rallied the troops, and I honestly can't take credit, because when that order came down, hundreds and hundreds of people wrote in, and it was because of them that there was a change, and she rescinded that order. And to me, that was a huge win. It was one of those moments where you can make a decision to just kind of sit quietly and let things happen, or you can rally the troops. And it was one of those moments where you rally the troops, and it really goes to show how the public process and inspiring people and getting them engaged can make a huge difference.
When I first came on the council, the Lincoln City Council in 2008, I learned very quickly that the city of Lincoln was probably about 6 months away from bankruptcy. It was the depths of the recession. Property values had plummeted, property taxes along with it, sales tax revenue was off. The city of Lincoln had been the fastest growing city, certainly in California, if not the nation, 2 years running. And all of that came to a screeching halt. We had to find a way to address that. I am not someone who supports taxes, but we put forward Measure K, which was a user utility tax to give the citizens of Lincoln the option of taxing themselves for a period of 4 years to maintain public safety services at the level they were that day. The voters, by a huge margin, 66%, said no, live within your means. We had to flatten the organization to do that. We had to lay off half of our police department. We had to freeze our fire department where it was. We're still working to recover from all of that. Those were very, very hard choices to make, but we made them. I'm going to bring this fast forward today. Those of you who know me know that I'm not necessarily a morning person, and so my brain's been a little bit fuzzy today, but Ms. Landon's comments about all that's going in the unincorporated county, right on my southern border, woke me up. 330 square feet just bought by Buzz Oates for commercial and industrial development, when I've got 2 million square feet in my own city right now that we're working hard to promote. The county working against us like that makes it very, very difficult for me to provide services to my community. My police force is still understaffed. My fire department is still understaffed. I need those revenues, and the county not partnering with us in these efforts makes that very, very difficult. So I'll take a stand right now and say that we need to be working together. The county should not be working against the municipalities. All major development is intended to happen within the municipalities. And so we got a partnership. We got to partner a lot better on all of this and work together.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, the next from the group, AB 193 currently in the state legislature would require all employees in the state to provide vaccination status. Do you support this? And I believe we're starting with Shanti.
I do not support this. I am all for people having access to vaccines. They should have every right to do that. I do not support the government at this point, especially with a COVID vaccine, saying you're required to get this. I mean, it's such a short answer because my answer is no, but let me expand beyond that a little bit, just so that you all know where I stand. So when it comes to kids, and kids being required to get the COVID vaccine in schools, I also don't support that. I don't believe our kids are at risk. I don't believe they spread it more than adults. I'm all for an adult. I mean, I got vaccinated myself, but I'm not okay at this point in the race. You know, for 5 years down the road, we've had a little bit more testing with the COVID vaccine. I see that it's effective. I see that it's protecting kids, and maybe kids are in danger at that point. I would definitely be willing to reconsider that. But right now, with where we are and knowing that not one child in Placer County died of COVID in the last 2 years, that is not something I would support.
Thank you. And short answers are perfectly okay.
The short answer is no. The short, solid answer is no. I'm not in favor of mandates. I wasn't in favor of mask mandates. I'm not in favor of vaccination mandates. Anyone who wants to wear a mask, anyone who wants to get a vaccination, absolutely supportive of that, but mandates, I'm absolutely opposed to.
I would agree. At this point, we're beyond high infection rates. We're recovering from this. I think it's important that there's enough education out there that people can wear a mask or do whatever they want to try to protect themselves. But I think we're to the point now where we're just hampering the businesses by doing that.
Thank you all. Next question. If you are elected supervisor, how would your advocacy for the Placer County Museum budget expand programs like Living History as well as support our 8 museums and their growth going forward? And we're starting with Paul.
I wonder who that question is. You know what? So jumping from being a city council member to being a supervisor in an area like that is going to be a learning curve for me. So the very first thing I do is sit down together and talk about it and learn everything I can about those programs, about what's being done, about what your needs are. You know I love history. And I was, let me just tell you that when the statue of Queen Isabella in Columbus was removed from the center of the state capitol, it just made me sick to see that kind of thing happening. That was taken off, hidden away in a warehouse in Rancho Cordova. Our history is being forgotten. Our history is incredibly important. And I would be very, very supportive of anything we can do to expand those programs.
Thank you. Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got some very interesting history, especially out in some of our rural areas. It's been eye-opening for me, learning about some of this. And I think it's really important for our children to get that history because it gives you a sense of pride for your own community to learn about the history of your community. And the living history is incredible. That just makes it so much more fun, especially for the kids. They get it better and they feel it more. And again, that sense of pride in your community is really important.
Well, I would say, I don't know exactly how I would go about increasing budgets for museums, but I would absolutely say that history, as Paul said, is incredibly important. And I think we have all seen, whether it's through our own kids or grandkids or nieces and nephews, that so much of our history has been erased and just forgotten. And so living history programs are incredibly important, and I fully support those, and would absolutely work to do whatever I can to keep those going.
Thank you. Okay, this question is, give examples of your community service, not your elected service, but your community service activities over the past 5 years. And I believe we're starting with Scott, Sean. I lost track. God dang it, I was new this week. All right, Shanti. Somebody's paying attention.
So, as a parent of kids who were adopted out of foster care, that's a passion of mine. And so my husband and I started an adoption network at our church and really kind of brought it together for families who are parents of adopted children to feel like they had a place where they could connect and find support. We also started what's called Safe Families, which is a crisis intervention for families who are about to be at risk of their kids being taken away for foster care. Because to me, I want to preempt that. I think the best thing that would have been for my kids would have been for them to have a healed household where they could have stayed with their birth parents, because that's the way it was intended to be. So Safe Families actually intervenes when they're at risk and there's a moment of crisis. They take those kids, they put them in a temporary home, just a loving family, and kind of help break the cycle and get the parents resources that they need so that they can kind of work through that before the kids get taken away. I'm also an active Rotarian. I've been a Rotary member for 4.5 years-ish, and really try and live by their motto, which is it the truth, and is it fair to all concerned? And is it going to be good for people? And then lastly, I would say I serve on the board at Lighthouse Counseling and Family Resource Center, and it has been a true joy and pleasure to serve in that capacity, because Lighthouse does an incredible amount of work in our community. You very likely have heard of them, and they once again kind of fall into that piece that I'm just so passionate about, which is helping break cycles of abuse and neglect so that kids can stay intact with their families.
I want to thank Paul for handling the microphone management for us. Community services kind of shows the heart, I think, of people, and I think it's important for electeds to get involved in community service. I started long before I was elected. Probably the biggest thing that I got involved with was the Downtown Roseville Merchants. So I opened my restaurant downtown. I had it for 12 years. The last 9 years, I served as president of the Downtown Roseville Merchants, and they're all volunteer positions, and I just spent a lot of time helping the businesses, reaching out, helped one guy do a payroll. He was writing checks out of his checkbook for payroll, that taught him how to do it correctly and legally, and working on the revitalization of downtown. I was probably the most involved volunteer in the revitalization effort of downtown Roseville. And I've been now sitting on the Downtown Lincoln Association too, just trying to share some of the things that happen from the Roseville perspective. I also got involved in Arcona early on, the Roseville Coalition of Neighborhood Associations. And it's not an HOA thing, it's actually, it was set up by the police as a nonprofit. And they just divided up the city in a bunch of different groups, and it's a great way to share information both directions. We have police and fire come to the meetings, and it's just very, pulls your community together. It's like the most base root level of community you can get. And we've grown that quite a bit, and it's been a very nice tool for the city to be able to get information out. And I serve on the executive board of that. I used to be president of my neighborhood association, both of them that I lived in, until I was elected, then I stepped down from that. I served on the RPAL board, the Roseville Police Activities League, as an actual board member, not as an elected. And the Coalition of Roseville Youth. I already mentioned the Roseville Volunteer Force. It's not a formal organization, it's just a bunch of people trying to solve problems. We've done some neat Christmas things, taking on a couple families every year that have real serious issues going on. And then my organization put on the Placer Valley Business Summit this year, and we donated the profits to the Gathering Inn, but it was just a business training system for business owners.
Scott?
I've been actively engaged with the Lincoln Police Activities League for probably going on 16, 17 years now. It's, for me, an incredibly important mission. The motto of the Lincoln Police Activities League is bridging the gap between cops and kids. Just that simple. If we're not bridging that gap between cops and kids, we're not doing our job. And let me give you an example of why that's important. At 2 a.m., when one of our officers comes across a wannabe gangbanger in an alleyway, that can go very bad, very, very fast. What we try to do through our various programs, one of them is summer camp for a week, where our officers are the counselors, but they don't show up in uniform. They show up in shorts and t-shirts. They're just the counselors. They get to know these kids over a week-long period. The kids get to know them. And then slowly on the last night around the campfire, the officers disappear one by one. and they come back in their uniforms. The kids have no idea that these people who are human beings, who they like, were police officers. And now they've got a face to that uniform. And when that officer encounters that kid in that alleyway again at 2 a.m., they know each other. They know each other by name, they know each other's families, and that is handled much, much differently. I think that's incredibly important. On another side, it's a little bit of a passion project for me. The city of Lincoln, I need to separate myself from the city of Lincoln because it's not the elected, it's community service. We have an Arts and Public Places program that I've been advancing for years. It creates a real sense of place in downtown Lincoln. I think you're starting to get a sense of that. We've got a lot of murals, a lot of other pieces there that have caused people to want to hang out downtown, to want to walk and be engaged in their community. We push our parades forward. Lincoln is, our motto is, or our vision statement is America's hometown. If you come up to Lincoln during any of our parades, it's a Hallmark movie. And we work very hard to make it so, and the Arts and Public Places program is a great portion of that work.
Thank you, Paul. All right, well, that is the last of our questions, so I'd like to turn it back to you all, give you a couple minutes to wrap up or add anything that you haven't touched on, issues that you see as the focus of your campaign. And we are going to start with Paul, I believe this time. All right.
Well, I'll just say again that I am a homegrown boy. I've lived pretty much my entire life here in South Placer. My family's been here since the 1940s. My wife's family has been here since the late 1800s, 6 generations on the same rice farm just over off of South Brewer. We have very, very deep roots in the community. Lincoln and Placer County are our homes. We care very deeply about what happens here. I'm currently serving my 4th term as a Lincoln City Council member. I've served 3 terms as mayor and a planning commissioner prior to that. I'm endorsed by Congressman LaMalfa, Congressman McClintock, Senator Jim Nielsen, Assemblyman Kevin Kiley, Supervisor Suzanne Jones, Sheriff Devin Bell, the Deputy Sheriff's Association, the Placer County Republican Assembly, most importantly, my wife Lisa, among many, many others.
Thank you. To Scott, please. Scott.
I'm the only candidate in this race that understands the seriousness of signing the front of a paycheck in the state of California. I've had to deal with, when I ran my business, I ran my own payroll. I dealt with the State Board of Equalization, insurance, permitting, building codes, inspections. I understand what that's like to be a business owner. And that should carry a lot of weight. For the last 4 years, I've chaired the Placer County Economic Development Board, and we've totally revamped that board. We've put some key people in those industry seats. Jeff Richardson sits on the retail seat. We've got the CEO for Sutter, Brian Alexander, in the healthcare seat. The presidents of 2 universities, it's a fantastic board, and we talk about economics, and we understand the process of economics. I serve on GSAC, the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. As soon as I'm done here, I have to run over to the fairgrounds. We have site selectors here visiting our area, learning about the value of our county. I sat next to Alan last night, who does health sciences, and he didn't even understand about the very inexpensive electricity that Roseville has, or some of the industries we already have here. And so those are key things to bring jobs to our community. I'll be your voice in the business community. I'll continue to listen, I'll help solve problems. I've already done that. It's not just a promise, I've been doing that. I also have the endorsement of Wendy Garrett, the retired CEO for the Chamber, and I think that means a lot because Wendy's watched the process, and she doesn't have to step into this, but she stepped in and endorsed me, and that does mean a lot. And I also have important people like Laura Mattioli, who was the Economic Development Director for the city for many years. She didn't have to do that. Jay Panzika, the retired CFO from the city, he watched what I do with the business loan program. I really pushed bringing that into the city and sat bank people in front of him to talk about how it could work. And Sonia Rusko, who was our city clerk for many years, those are really important endorsements because they knew me, they knew how I operated. And I think those are the relationships that can help get our county tied back to our cities. We've got to represent our cities at the county level.
Thank you, Scott. Shanti?
So my dad was an East Indian immigrant. He came here to the United States when he was 17 with $7 in his pocket. And I learned at a really young age that it's not just a blessing to live here in the United States, it's a privilege. And I truly believe the same thing about Placer County. It is a blessing and a privilege to live here. And I love living here. I love raising my family here, and I hope that my kids choose to stay here and raise my grandkids eventually here as well. I am committed to being the person on the board who is accessible and reachable at any moment. And I think anyone who's here who has worked with me before knows that at the drop of a hat, I will answer the phone, I will respond to your text, I'm accessible and reachable. And I'm committed to continuing that. But I also believe that it goes beyond just relationship. A big part of this job is getting things done and solving problems. I consider myself a problem solver, and while I may not be an elected city person, I see myself as a city person in the sense that everything I do is in the city. I go to Lincoln and I buy my gas or my groceries, and I do everything in the city. And so all I can do is promise to be that person who's accessible and who's available and who will fight and advocate for every one of the constituents, regardless of whether they're rural or they're city. They're all our constituents. And if one of our cities is not thriving, then our county isn't thriving. And so it's my goal to make sure that each of our cities is thriving so that our whole county can succeed.
Thank you, Shanti. And thank each and every one of you for your respectful and informative comments. If your question didn't get answered, or if you have a burning issue that you want to talk to these folks about, I encourage you. They're very accessible. Reach out to them. There's information on your table on how to reach out to them. I'm sure they're going to be around here a few minutes more this morning. And even if you're not a constituent of District 2, and you find one of these folks that shares your same values, I'm sure they would appreciate your financial support as well. Oftentimes this election for supervisor, your school district, your city council are referred to as down ballot elections, meaning that by the time you get to the bottom of your ballot, you'll find those folks there. And a lot of times people get fatigued and they stop voting before they get down to what is really the most important election decision that you'll make for you. If you have a pothole, if there's a homeless camp in your neighborhood, if there's a dangerous intersection, these are the people that you're going to turn to. These are the people that are going to have an immediate and direct impact on your life. So I'd suggest this year, instead of starting at the top of your ballot and working your way down, start with your school boards and your city council and your supervisor races. And if you get exhausted, you get exhausted with the fight. So with that in mind, what's important for the business community is that we are supporting pro-business folks. And on your table is an invitation or a flyer to the Roseville Area Chamber of Commerce Political Action Committee event, a fundraiser to be held on June 9th at Bennett's Kitchen on Eureka Road. We would love to have a lot of sponsors here. If you've never been to a PAC event, spend the $75 and come find out what it's about. You'll be able to meet these people and see not only these candidates here, but electeds from throughout Placer County that will all have an impact on your daily life. And so I really encourage you, it's $75, it's not a lot of money, but the important thing is that it helps give the business community in Roseville a voice and a role in local elections. So with that, again, thanks to Randy and Lisa for once again hosting us here.